But welcome to the webinar, everybody. Appreciate everybody joining. We got about 87 people on right now. And this is a webinar about how active listening makes you a better leader. And this is something that I used to teach when I was a business skills instructor for Global Knowledge before I became a portfolio director. And we'll talk a little bit about what I do at Global Knowledge here in just a minute. But active listening is something that actually is much harder in practice than it is in theory. It's hard sometimes to just pay attention to who's talking to you and listen to actually what they're saying without formulating prejudgments or just formulating a response while they're talking to you. So we're going to just kind of get into some tips and techniques of how to do that. And I'll go ahead and get started now. Okay, so for the attendees, you can open and hide your control panel with the orange arrow. If you want to join audio, mic and speakers to use voice over IP, telephone and dial-in using the info provided. Today's webinar is being recorded, by the way. If you don't have the option to mute or unmute, it means you're automatically muted. This webinar was set up by a colleague of mine named Rowan. She is not here today, so I'm actually running this myself. So I don't normally set up the webinars. So I don't sometimes know exactly how it looks on your end, but hopefully everything looks okay. Okay, just real briefly, please ignore the picture. It's not the best one in the world. So my name's Dan Stober, and I'm the Global Portfolio Director for IT Management and Best Practices at Global Knowledge. So I manage the project management, business analysis, ITIL, enterprise architecture, Agile and Scrum and ServiceNow portfolios. And then I'm also the Global Director for our leadership and business skills portfolio. I've been with Global Knowledge for right around 7 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. Doesn't seem like it. I joined Global Knowledge after I retired from the Army. I spent most of my career in the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg. So leadership and teaching leadership and participating in leadership activities was something that was sort of near and dear to my heart while I served my time in the Army. And it's really served me well in my career after the Army as well. I do want to let everybody know your questions. If you have any questions and you put them in the Q&A, I will be seeing them periodically, but if I don't answer your question right away, please don't think I'm ignoring you. There will be a Q&A session at the end as well. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, the webinar objectives, and before I even touch on this, let me say this webinar will be registered with PMI. So for any of you out there that have your PMP credential like I do, or are seeking to obtain your PMP credential, this webinar will count as one PDU under the leadership category with PMI. So it will be registered, and I'll talk about the registration information with PMI at the end of the webinar. So after completing today's webinar or course, what we'll be able to do is define what is listening, what is active listening, talk about the components of active listening versus passive listening, explain how to become a better active listener, and then also talk about how active listening contributes to effective management or effective leadership. So we'll dive right into section 1 and just talk a little bit about listening. So what is listening? I mean, obviously hearing is the actual ability to, you know, translate sounds that are produced in the atmosphere and make meaning of them is hearing. But listening is to hear something with thoughtful attention. And the International Listening Association defines listening as, the process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and then responding to spoken and or nonverbal messages. So listening is not just an auditory thing; it's also a visual thing. Where there was actually a study that was conducted. It's been a little while now. It's probably been 20 or so years. It was done at the University of Wisconsin, and they surmised through this study that about 55% of what we communicate in a face-to-face environment is actually communicated via body language. And the other 38% or another 38% is through the tone or inflection of your voice. And only really 7% of it is about the words that come out of your mouth, which makes things interesting now, since we are finding ourselves, I know the vast majority of us are finding ourselves in a situation where we're working remotely, and we don't have the advantage necessarily of being able to see somebody face to face, on Zoom calls or video calls. Sometimes, not everybody's using their camera. Some organizations strongly encourage people to use their camera. Some require people to use their cameras, but some don't have any such policy. But you can obviously pick up tone and inflection of someone's voice. If you're on a Zoom call, you can hear the words that they're saying, but what you can't see is their body language unless they have their video on. When you're in a face-to-face or a physical, meeting, you can see all those things, and it gives you an advantage. If anybody here has kids, I have 2 teenagers and an 11-year-old daughter. I'm picking up their body language constantly. So when I, tell my daughter to clean her room, and her answer is sure, by the tone and inflection of her voice, I can tell that she's not enthusiastic about it. By her body language, when she slumps her shoulders, I can tell she's not enthusiastic about it. But if I was doing that over, say, text message with her, for example, and I said, Savannah, can you clean your room? And she said, sure. That could be like, sure. Yeah, I'd really love to clean my room. Or, it could be sure, how she really means it when I ask her to do something like that. But listening, or hearing with thoughtful attention is something that's often kind of a lost art. Many times, people, when they're listening to somebody, or even while you're listening to me right now, you might have other things going on in the background. You might be thinking about a meeting you have later today. You might be thinking about a task on a project that you have to get done, or a deliverable you have due this week. So there are a lot of distractors that keep us from actively listening. So we're going to talk a little bit about, why does that happen, and what can we do to sort of avoid that happening and really become active listeners. So listening facts, again, another study that was conducted at the University of Minnesota indicated that 60% of business misunderstandings are due to ineffective listening. 80% of all business communication has to be repeated. This I don't find surprising in any way, shape, or form. It seems like, at least in my experience, probably that's a good ratio. 4 out of 5 times when I tell somebody something, I have to repeat it to them. And it's not really that, I've communicated something and they just don't care. It's that all those other sort of external factors get in the way of them hearing, understanding, and acknowledging the communication the first time that it's transmitted. Less than 20% of what top management says is understood 3 levels below. So if I look at sort of the hierarchy in my organization, or maybe you could look at the hierarchy in your organization, think 3 levels up, and A, are they communicating at all? B, are you understanding what they are communicating? Do you understand things like your organizational strategy and how you're going to get there? Do you understand, the, tactical and departmental tasks that contribute to the overall success of the organization? And are they communicating to you, how does that contribute to the mission of the organization? 80% of our day is spent communicating. That's a lot of our day. That is an absolute lot. And think about how often you're communicating, whether you're talking to somebody in a conference call, whether you're emailing, whether you're texting. We spend 80% of our day communicating. And that's a lot of effort to put into something if we're not doing it in the correct way. And 25% of people, only 25% of people are efficient at listening and understanding. So if we do something this much, how comes we're so bad at it? Well, there are a lot of reasons, and we're going to talk about some of those reasons coming up. So what does make it difficult to listen? Well, here's the thing. People listen at a much faster rate than people can speak. Think about the human brain and how fantastic, human physiology is, and how our brains are constructed, how we can process so much information in such a small amount of time. Or, just think about, as you're listening to this right now, it's, if you've ever heard of or practiced mindfulness, it's really trying to be in the moment right now and focused on what is going on right now without distraction. It's incredibly difficult to do. And when someone's talking to you, your brain automatically is thinking of other things or processing other information, whether it's just looking out the window at the trees blowing in the wind, or whether it's thinking about what you're going to make for dinner tonight. People can take in so much more information than just what you are saying to them. So what happens is listeners multitask or jump ahead and make assumptions about what the speaker is saying. And we'll talk a little bit about prejudging coming up here. Instead of focusing attention on the speaker, the listener is sometimes thinking about what to say next, or is just waiting for their turn to talk. Maybe you do have a very good point that you would like to make. Part of being an active listener is something called attending skills, which is giving people the space to finish their thought or say what they have to say, and you listening to what they have to say before formulating a response. Confusion about the subject is an excuse for apathy. So if you're confused, I was watching something on LinkedIn the other day, and it was this guy who makes these short videos, and he's a consultant of some sort. I don't exactly know his name, but I see him on LinkedIn pretty often. He makes these little short videos, and he was talking about being the idiot in the room. And he said he's not afraid of being the idiot in the room. He's not afraid to ask questions so that he doesn't experience confusion on a subject. Asking clarifying questions is another part of being a good active listener. Prejudices block an open mind. So again, we talked a little bit about prejudging based on what someone is saying. For example, I live in Virginia. I live at Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia, and my wife and I and the kids, we moved into this house back in December, and the couple that we bought the house from had a radically different sort of design motif than what we were accustomed to or what we were looking for. So we went basically through a whole home renovation, and one of the projects that we did in the whole home renovation was we installed cable railings. And we went to a contractor first to see, hey, how much is this going to cost? And they came back with some astronomical number. And I was like, there is no way we're paying that for that. It doesn't make sense. We're not doing it. And, my wife was like, well, can't you do it? And I was like, well, I'm not a carpenter or anything like that. I'm pretty handy, but, at any rate, uh, went as soon as she said, "Well, can't you do it?" I started prejudging, and it kind of blocked me from thinking that I would actually be able to do it. But I did sit down, I did do some research, and I was able to actually figure it out, and I was able to do it myself, which saved us a couple $1,000. So hey, that's a really good thing. But when she was asking me or talking to me about the possibility of me doing it, I was sort of prejudging my capabilities as to whether I'd be able to do it. And it turned out I actually was able to do it. Environmental factors, things like background noise, sometimes make it difficult to hear. There's nothing you can do about it sometimes. Like I just said, we went through a whole home renovation here. It just ended about 10 days ago or so. And every day I'm working here in my home office, and there are circular saws and drills and hammers and every power tool you can imagine going on in either another room or another floor of the house. And it made communication difficult sometimes during some meetings. So I'd have to, every now and again, just if it was an important meeting, I'd have to go somewhere to another environment where I could actually have quiet, whether I had to go out and just sit in my car for an hour to take a meeting, or go to the local coffee house and take a meeting. Um, but if you're experiencing things that make it difficult for you to listen, like background noise or environmental factors, uh, do your best to mitigate those. And then people aren't typically trained to listen effectively, and that's part of what we're talking about today, is how can we train ourselves to listen more effectively. Okay, so listening and management, how do these two things come together, or listening and leadership? Uh, leadership and management, some people use the terms interchangeably. Uh, you know, leadership to me is the, act of providing purpose, direction, and motivation. Management to me is sort of overseeing tasks and deliverables. But listening is one of the most important managerial skills, and communication is vital to management and leadership. And listening is essential to communication. Think about those statistics that we just talked about, that 80% of business communications have to be repeated. Think about the time that you can save and the efficiencies that you can achieve if you're able to do that the first time, every time. It would probably eliminate, a lot of misunderstandings that happen inside of a business. So effective listening does a couple things. It promotes increased productivity and higher morale. If you've ever worked at a job where you feel like you're just not being heard, kind of put the shoe on the other foot and say, okay, I experienced this time where I felt like my leadership just really wasn't listening to me. They weren't taking what I had to say seriously, or they were blowing me off or something like that. And then put the shoe on the other foot, and make sure that you're not doing that to those who you are leading right now. So when those that work for you or report to you feel like they're truly being listened to, it does certainly generate higher morale. It prevents misunderstandings. Uh, if you've ever played we used to play it when I was in school, when I was very young, play the telephone game where the teacher starts off by saying something to Johnny, and then Johnny says it to Sarah, and Sarah says it to so and so, and eventually it goes the whole way around the room. And by the time it gets to the end, it's nothing like the original phrase that the teacher said to Johnny to start off with. But why does that happen? Well, it's normally because the kids aren't really listening to what the other kids are saying, or Johnny didn't really listen to what the teacher said in the first place. And so it's actually a very simple and good exercise to talk about, how misunderstandings can occur. And then what do misunderstandings produce? A lot of times they produce conflict. So inside of the workplace, we're always looking to reduce conflict, and clear, concise communication, and then active listening, where we're getting the full meaning of what someone is saying, can help to reduce that conflict. The good news is that listening is a skill that can be improved. So just like any, if you want to make your body stronger, you go to the gym and you work out. This is sort of like a mental exercise, taking the time to think about the things that we talk about today. Maybe you can try it out tonight when you get home with one of your kids or your spouse or your partner, your friend. These are skills that you can put to use right away. And you'd be surprised how much more efficiently you can communicate when you listen actively. Managers who become better listeners are more likely to be successful and effective than those who do not. Again, think about how much more motivated you are personally to work for someone that is listening to you and hearing you and cares about what you're saying, versus the manager who doesn't. Are you really willing to go the extra mile for them? And then kind of flip that around and think about how that works with the folks that report to you. So let's talk about some active listening and components of active listening. All right, so what is active listening? Well, active listening is the skill of focusing your attention on a speaker in order to comprehend what the speaker is saying and convey your comprehension or need for clarification back to the speaker. So I'm guilty of it. Probably everybody here is guilty of it in some way, shape, or form. Someone says something to you and you just say, got it. And maybe you really don't understand what they said to you or what they meant by what they said. Part of active listening is making those clarifying statements. And we're going to talk about clarifying statements coming up here. But, focusing your attention on a speaker is component number one. Focusing your attention on that speaker like they're literally the only person in the room, so that you can understand what they're saying and then also convey back to them that you do understand them, or convey back to them that you need clarification. So active listening involves a restatement of either the message or the feelings of the speaker to the satisfaction of the speaker. So what does that mean? If this was a communication class instead of a listening class, communication is formulating a message and broadcasting that message out to somebody else or some audience. In the event of communication, the onus is really on the communicator or the person sending the message to make sure that the message is transmitted in such a manner that it can be understood. When you're listening, or when you're trying to participate in active listening, what you're trying to do is reassure the speaker that their message has been heard, understood, and acknowledged, and give them some satisfaction that has happened. So part of that is listening without giving advice or telling the speaker what they should be thinking. Without necessarily analyzing what they're saying, just hearing the words that they have to say, and then without problem solving right away. So again, these are things, when we think about the advice, think about a time maybe a friend came to you with a problem, and what you're trying to do, what a lot of us try to do, is immediately start problem solving or giving advice instead of just hearing what they have to say. Or listening to what they have to say. All of these things, while we're trying to formulate the advice that we want to give to our friend, or analyzing the situation, or trying to problem solve. What we're really doing is now everything that they say after that, if they're continuing to talk, is kind of getting garbled because our mind immediately is going to something else. So active listening is sort of suspending those things, suspending our desire to give advice, or conduct analysis, or problem solve. So what are some components of active listening? Well, first of all, and we talked about judging a little bit earlier, is suspend your judgment. It is nearly impossible to be able to listen to somebody effectively if you're automatically starting to judge the situation, because when we start judging the situation, again, our mind is going through a completely different exercise. So suspend your judgment while someone's talking to you, listen to what they have to say, wait for them to finish, and then start doing things like asking clarifying questions. Number two, clarify. You can ensure that the message was received properly by doing things like asking clarifying questions. We will talk about that here coming up. Paraphrase. So if someone tells you a short story, say we'll just call it a story, or this and this happened, paraphrasing back to them is a good way to make sure that you have understood what they have said. So that could go something like, what I heard you say was A, B, C, and D. Or summarize again, I heard you say A, B, C, and D, and that you want to do X. Reflect feelings. Reflecting feelings is sometimes called mirroring. All of us have what are called mirror neurons in our brain. It kind of is the reason that we can empathize with other people, or we can sort of feel the feelings that other people are feeling. I kind of make fun of my wife sometimes because she likes to watch like these television shows. Like she watches like Grey's Anatomy, and she's been watching it forever, and she knows all the characters and everything like that. And every now and again, she'll see something on TV that makes her kind of choke up or whatever. It's mirroring. Her mirror neurons are taking over her brain. These are not even real people. They are not experiencing real tragedy or anything like that, but she can empathize with the emotions of the character. And being able to empathize with the person to whom you are talking, or the person that you are listening to, is a good way to show that person that you're really paying attention to what they're saying. And then use attending skills. I talked about that a little bit earlier. Using attending skills are things like, inviting body language. If someone's talking to you and you're standing in front of them with your arms crossed, or sort of in a defensive posture, it's not a very welcoming sort of environment for someone to share with you. So again, that's another barrier to communication. So having more inviting body language is a way to use attending skills. So how do we be how can we be an active listener, or how can I be an active listener, or you be an active listener? First and foremost, give the speaker your full attention. We live in an environment now where people are absolutely tethered to their device, whether it's the iPad or the phone, or the laptop, or something. It's difficult sometimes because, back 20 years ago, a phone was just a phone. It was something you used to make phone calls and receive phone calls. Now it's everything. Now it's your calendar. Now it's your contact list. Now it's your computer. Now it's your wallet. You pay with it. People are always have their phones in their hand. And it's almost second nature for people to pick up their phone and look at it every, few minutes or even every few seconds. If someone's talking to you, the first step of being an active listener is giving the speaker your full attention. Put your phone down for a minute and just focus on what they have to say. And then focus on the speaker's message, not on formulating your response. How many times does that happen, that someone's still saying something and all you're doing is waiting for them to stop talking so that you can respond? Focus on their message, not on formulating your response. So sometimes, and I'm guilty of it, it happens to me, often sometimes, is I misinterpret, say, for example, my wife and I are having a conversation, or she says something to me, and my first thing that I want to do is, maybe she'll say, "Did you take the trash out?" Well, really, the message that she's sending to me is, "Did you take the trash out?" She's asking me if I took the trash out. Um, and in my mind, sometimes I want to jump ahead to telling her why I haven't taken the trash out. I'm formulating my response, and saying, "Well, no, I haven't done it yet because I was doing A, B, C, and D." And she was like, "Okay, I was just asking if you'd taken it out. If not, can you?" But if you spend time formulating your response, instead of just listening to what the speaker is saying, sometimes you end up answering the wrong question. Maintain eye contact. Not, you don't have to stare a hole into somebody or anything like that, but maintaining eye contact is a way to let the speaker know that you're listening and engaged with them. Ask open-ended questions. We're going to talk coming up here about open-ended questions. Suspend judgment on what the speaker is saying, which we've already talked about. Show your understanding by restating what the speaker said, and then getting clarification. That could be starting off a sentence with, "So what you're saying is A, B, and C," and they could say, "No, I actually mean D, E, and F." So asking clarifying questions. All right. So giving the speaker your full attention. Again, don't multitask while you're listening. Minimize or eliminate potential distractions like your cell phone. Close the door, things like that, so you can try to minimize environmental noise or background noise. A really sort of in my mind, dismissive thing to do while someone is talking to you is looking at your watch. Um, if you really don't have time to talk to somebody, I mean, you genuinely may just want to know what time it is right now, but it's sending the speaker a message that either A, I don't have time for this, or B, I can't wait for this to be over. If you look at your watch while someone is talking to you, it's sort of an unconscious way of rushing the speaker to finish their point. Really try not to do it. I've done it before. It can be seen as sort of disrespectful or rude, so really try to avoid doing that. Give the speaker your undivided attention, so it conveys respect for the speaker and the message. Please resist the temptation to multitask while you're listening. It used to be seen as like some big strength, if and some people actually still see it as a strength. Oh, I'm really able to multitask. Um, when I used to teach portfolio management, or the management of multiple projects, programs, and associated work, um, you know, so like think about a portfolio of projects, like just a whole bunch. Like I'm a portfolio director now, and have about 600 or so products that I'm responsible for. And at any one time, there could be 40 projects going on. Um, one of the things that I would teach in portfolio management is do your best to avoid multitasking. And multitasking usually involves some sort of limiting resource. There's some resource in every organization that sort of constrains how much can get done, whether it is I only have so many application developers, or I only have so much of, so many backhoes, or whatever it is. If you're in construction, there's some sort of limiting resource. Um, and multitasking is taking that resource and putting it in a whole bunch of different places all at one time, instead of finding the most important uh, project or the most important deliverable and putting it on that until it's done. Um, and this is one of the reasons why communications get garbled a lot of times, is because we're multitasking while communications are happening. We're thinking about other things instead of giving the speaker our undivided attention. You might think you're saving time, but you're actually increasing the risk of misunderstanding the speaker when you're trying to multitask when someone's talking to you. Focus on the speaker's message. So a lot of listeners spend the time that they aren't talking about thinking about what they're going to say next. I'm guilty of it. It happens sometimes. Again, for anybody who's ever practiced mindfulness, what you'll experience, and if you haven't, you'll experience, even when you're trying to be singularly focused on, say, I'm going to focus on my breathing, and I'm going to do this breathing exercise for 1 minute. For 1 minute, I'm just going to think about the air coming in and out of my lungs. I'm going to feel how cool, how it's cool coming in, it's warmer coming out. I'm going to inhale for 5 seconds. I'm going to exhale for 7 seconds, and I'm going to do this breathing exercise. Even when you're doing something as focused as that, your mind is going to go in another place, because, again, our minds are designed to think. We're constantly jumping ahead or racing ahead. It takes practice, just like mindfulness takes practice. It takes practice to become an active listener and just listen without thinking about, for example, what you're going to say next. Don't just wait for your turn to talk. Try to engage with the speaker's message. Try to really understand, what is the message that they're trying to convey to me. And then it's not enough to hear the speaker's words. You also need to reflect on their tone, inflection, and volume, and then their body language. Think back to that University of Wisconsin study where 55% of what was communicated was body language, 38% was tone and inflection and volume of the voice, and then only 7% of it was actually what the words were. So focus on the message. Sometimes these things can get lost in translation a little bit over written communications, things like email or text. But here we're really talking about listening, which is an auditory function. So maintaining eye contact demonstrates to the speaker that you're fully engaged. If you're looking down at the ground or looking away or looking at the leaves blowing in the wind, it sort of sends a message that you're not really engaged. Fixing your gaze upon the speaker shows that you respect them and their message, and the speaker is likely going to look you in the eye also to kind of gauge your interest. It doesn't mean you need to be kind of creepy about it and look at somebody unblinkingly into their eyes. Occasional brief breaks in eye contact are natural and acceptable. If you just sit there and stare at somebody, it's uncomfortable. Everybody knows that. But making eye contact periodically is seen as a good thing. It conveys that you're engaged. And then be mindful of facial expressions and body language, because it can communicate, just as much, if not more, than the words that are actually being said. So asking open-ended questions, meaningful questions can show that you understood the speaker. They can elicit additional information and context, and then asking open-ended questions can increase the flow of information and allow that speaker to provide opinions or feedback that can help you gain understanding. But here's the rub. Don't interrupt the speaker to ask questions. Wait until they're finished speaking, and then ask those open-ended questions. And then open-ended questions are ones that elicit more than a yes or no response. So it could be like, how could you see that working? Or can you tell me more about that? That's an open-ended question. Saying, are you going to have lunch today is sort of a yes or no question. That's not really an open-ended question. It's more of a closed question. So closed questions are designed to elicit a very short response, like a yes or a no. Can we use the regional office to handle this? And they usually start with words can, will, is, should, or could. Open-ended questions are kind of like the 5 W's or how. Open-ended questions are designed to open a flow of information or, achieve clarity. How do you feel about using the regional offices to handle this sort of thing? So it's sort of the same question, but now it's asking, how do you feel about it versus can we? The answer to can we use the regional office to handle this could just be yes or no. Or how do you feel about using the regional office could be, no, I really think that this demands attention from the main office because this is that important. So open-ended questions, again, start with the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, or how. So asking questions to improve understanding, you can do a couple of different things. You can use a couple different techniques. Probing questions would be something like, tell me more about that. So you're asking for more information. Focus. How did you arrive at that figure? Walk me through it. Can you tell me how, you got to this project is going to cost X amount of money? You can sort of give a little bit. You can say, well, it'd be okay if I delivered that on Friday. Clarify it. Let me see if I understand you correctly. You're saying that the project is going to cost $1 million. Add, really, and then you said, so that's kind of adding additional context to a conversation. So Sue said to me that John is leaving in 2 weeks to find another job. Really? And what did you say? Close. So if anybody here is in sales, closing is usually the hardest part of something like of a sales situation. Closing, what would stop you from moving forward with us today? Or is that acceptable? Are those terms you can live with? And shift. Okay, the need's clear. Can we talk about the start date? So you're shifting from one part of the conversation where the need has been stated. You're saying, yes, the need is clear. Can we talk about the start date? When are we going to start? So again, all of these kinds of questions are components of active listening. It shows that you've listened to what the speaker had to say, and now you're trying to improve understanding. Suspending judgment, we talked a little bit about twice already, but here again, just to touch on it, keeping an open mind will help you to listen effectively. Practice empathy, again, mirror neurons coming into play here, where we're trying to, display empathy or trying to feel what the other person is feeling. And then don't jump to conclusions or judge the message while the speaker is speaking. You might think that you're saving time, but your assumptions could be faulty and result in misunderstanding. I have to practice this a lot. I am the kind of person, I'm just wired that way, where I tend to make assumptions. I have to actively train myself not to do that. Normally, I'm automatically assuming that, for example, maybe that my wife is dissatisfied with something that I've done when really she's only asking me a question. It's, sometimes, you know what they say about assumptions. I'm not going to say it here, but making assumptions is really a critical factor in misunderstandings. So restating the speaker's message, paraphrasing the speaker's message can confirm to the speaker that you understood them. It doesn't simply mean repeating what the speaker has said to you back to them verbatim. It's kind of using your own words. So it's sort of like the Cliff's Notes or the book report version of what someone has just said to you. Be careful not to use judgmental words, tone, or body language as you're paraphrasing. And then again, avoid attempting to problem solve in your paraphrasing. If someone wants your opinion on how to solve a problem, normally they'll ask you for it. Um, Maybe they're just telling you something for your information, or uh, they're telling you, because they have an obligation to tell you. Maybe they're not asking for you to solve the problem for them. But if you're spending your time problem solving, there are the chances are that you haven't totally listened to what they have to say. Again, get clarification. So confirm that you understood the speaker. And an example of that would be, so what you're saying is that you want to do A, B, and C. Yes, that is what I'm saying, is I want to do A, B, and C. So it gives you an opportunity to get a verbal acknowledgement that you've understood the speaker. Also, getting clarification includes perception checking. So check whether something you perceive about the other person is true. So feelings, intentions, motives, reactions. It's a way for you to test your hunches, and you can express your perception sort of tentatively. An example of that would be, I sense that you're upset that we can't meet the deadline. Am I right? Not, how are you feeling right now? Be more specific than that. So if it was me and I was coming up to my boss, Angie, and I said, Angie, I know that we said we were going to launch this product on March 19th, but due to A, B, and C, we're not going to be able to launch on March 19th. It's going to be more like April 15th. And then I would probably get something back from Angie saying, or, she would say something back to me, like, well, I really, thought we were going to hit March 19th. And I could say, well, I sense you're upset that we can't meet the deadline. Am I right? That would be a way for me to clarify, is she really upset? Or maybe she's not. Maybe we're talking on the phone and I can't see her body language. I can't see the look on her face. I can only hear the tone of her voice and the words coming out of her mouth. Or, I get the impression you're angry with me. Are you? Not, why are you angry? Or why are you so mad? Clarification or perception checking. This is a way for you to check your own perceptions, not that of the speaker. So how does this apply to you? So an effective manager or leader is a good listener. Active listening helps leaders and managers do things like better understand their employees, show respect for people and their ideas, and then build stronger relationships. Like earlier in the webinar, I asked the question, have you ever worked for somebody that you felt like just didn't listen to you? And think about what that felt like. And do you want to be that person? Since you're here, the chances are you don't want to be that person. You want to be the person that's a good listener. So just know that if you're participating in active listening and practicing active listening, it's going to convey to your employees that you understand them better, that you respect them and their ideas, and that will sort of build a stronger relationship. And what it does is it results in increased productivity, improved conflict resolution because it reduces misunderstandings, and then higher morale because people always, it's sort of become something that I've heard a lot over the last 6 months, a year, is people don't leave their job, people leave their managers. Don't what, to the extent to which that is true or untrue, I've seen no data on it or anything like that. But if you're the kind of manager that your employees know you listen to them, it gives them your employees one less reason to leave. And the cost of employee turnover is astronomical. Think about the experience walking out the door, the tribal knowledge walking out the door. Think about the time to recruit, hire, and train a new employee, when sometimes it can come down to just something as simple as being a good listener and making sure your employees know that they're heard, understood, and acknowledged. So increased productivity, active listening results in clearer communication, which means less wasted time with follow-up conversations. How many times has anyone here sat in on a meeting where you're talking about the same exact thing and nothing's happened? It's happened to me before. Taking time to listen actively can prevent costly mistakes or duplication of effort or rework. So again, the never-ending meetings about the same thing, or having to do something over. I had a boss back when I was really, really young that said to me, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, how are you going to find the time to do it over? And that comes down to a lot of times communication, actively listening. Are we conveying? Is the message being conveyed to me what I'm actually hearing? Improve conflict resolution. So as a manager, it's likely you're going to have to manage conflict, interdepartmental conflict, interpersonal conflict. Many of the conflicts that develop in the workplace are the result of poor communication. Maybe you're a matrixed organization and you share resources like, say marketing resources or something like that. And nobody's communicated how certain assets are going to be allocated. That can result in conflict. But actively listening can help you to understand the issues behind conflicts and then avoid the misunderstandings that often lead to conflicts. Higher morale. People want to know that their voices are heard and that their opinions are valued. Engaging in active listening demonstrates to your employees that you respect them and their ideas. Go back to that. People don't leave their job, they leave their boss. I mean, I can't say that that's true 100% of the time, but it's sort of one of those things that's, kind of, I've been hearing around a lot lately. Sometimes people really do like their boss and they leave because they find a better opportunity. But sometimes it's, my boss doesn't listen to me. When employees sense that you're a good listener, they're more likely to come to you with ideas and suggestions that could improve performance. So what have we talked about today? Well, right now it's 12:54 Eastern time, so we got about 5 minutes left. Talked about listening and how it's essential to communication and management, but many people are poor listeners. Poor listening can be the result of a lot of different factors, from just the way our brains work to multitasking to environmental factors. Active listening is a skill that people can improve. So just like the first time you ever try anything, you're not going to be the master of it. Even people who are, a natural, even Michael Jordan wasn't the best basketball player in the world as soon as he picked up a basketball. He trained himself and took coaching. Active listening is a skill and you can improve upon it. To be a better active listener, remember to give the speaker your full attention. Focus on the speaker's message, not on formulating your response. Maintain that eye contact, ask open-ended questions, suspend judgment on what the speaker is saying, restate or paraphrase what the speaker has said, and then ask clarifying questions or get clarification. It's key to being a good listener, or to make someone feel like you're really listening to them, to do things like ask clarifying questions. Because if someone's spending their time communicating to you and you walk away and you say to yourself, I literally have no idea what they just said, you just wasted your time and theirs. So get clarification. It shows that you're actually listening. and active listening can help managers increase productivity, reduce conflict, and improve morale. So right now, go ahead and take questions. If you want to put any question, if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the Q&A chat box there, and I'll be happy to go ahead and answer those. Right now, just want to talk real quick, recommended courses. If you're interested in things like communication, leadership, management, we have a couple courses that are really good for that. Our flagship leadership course here at Global Knowledge is course code 8944. It's called Active Leadership for IT Professionals. It's focused on, you know, those who are leading IT departments or dealing with leadership situations in an IT environment. For those who are in project management, we have our project management leadership and communication class. And then for any general audience, if you're not a project manager, if you're not an IT professional, if you just want to become a better communicator, we have our Communicating for Clarity class. Well, it's 1 day long. Project management, leadership, and communication is 3 days. Active leadership for IT professionals is 3 days. So in the chat, there are 25 questions. Holy smokes. Okay. Yes, this was recorded, so you can refer back. Any tips when interviewing for a job? Interesting. Tips for when you're in a job interview. Make the interviewer feel like there's nothing else in the world going on besides the conversation that you're having right now. And that should go without saying for any sort of job interview. I would absolutely recommend asking clarifying questions. I would absolutely recommend not formulating your response until you hear everything that they have to say and you take a brief pause and are able to formulate, you know, a response based on their question, not start formulating a response halfway through their question. 2 quick questions I can toss your way if you'd like.
Chris.
Oh, hey, Chris.
So there were 2 questions that came in. I'll start with a short one from Gregory. He basically asks, when you're checking for perception or perception checking, should that be in the form of a closed-ended question?
It can be. If you say, you know, did I understand that correctly? That's a closed-ended question. And they could say, no, you didn't understand that correctly. There were, yes, you did understand. So perception checking, yes, can be a closed-ended question.
Okay. And Tom asked an interesting question. He says, sometimes it feels like you'll forget what you were going to say if you do not formulate your response while you listen. It can be tough to bookmark an idea if you just let it go and listen attentively. Is that something that just takes practice? And maybe are there any strategies that you could come up with maybe to, you know, sort of bookmark an idea while you pay close attention to a speaker?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I always recommend is if you're in a conversation, you know, you're not always going to be in a conversation in a professional setting. If you're in a conversation in a professional setting, you're probably going to have a notebook with you or something like that. Just jot your question down real quick and then go back to it later when the speaker has finished. If it's something you're afraid that you're going to forget, just try to wait for a natural pause in the conversation and say, can I ask you a question at this time? Or, you know, before you go on, can I ask you a question real quick?
That's great. And it supports a point or suggestion that Colleen made, stating the same about writing it down so you can bring the question up later when
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. I appreciate it. We're actually a minute over time. So I'm probably going to get kicked out of the Zoom room here. For anybody who's interested, you can actually save money on your next Global Knowledge course. You get 25% off if you use these promo codes, webinar 25 in the US, CA webinar 25 in Canada. So we would love to be able to give you a discount on your next class, and you get that for attending this webinar. So this webinar will be registered for One Leadership PDU on pmi.org for those who are PMP qualified or want to become PMP qualified. Our provider code, our PMI provider ID number is 1999, 1999. So when it says training organization, if you just want to, instead of putting global knowledge in there, you can put in 1999 and it'll come up as global knowledge. And then activity code for this will be 9999XX. So 9999XX. And then it'll come up with how active listening makes you a better leader webinar for One Leadership PDU. So if you have questions, you can always ask us anytime. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We would love for you to follow us on LinkedIn. We've got, 25, 30,000 followers or so. We'd love to have you as one as well. We're always dropping knowledge bombs on folks. So we'd love to be able to share some of what's going on in the IT community with you. And then, of course, you can always visit us at globalknowledge.com. So we have a great sort of what we call our resource library of on-demand and live webinars, white papers, courses, special offers, and more. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate everybody joining, and I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.